overall, I love to say that Ibogaine is very good at getting somebody from -10 to 0. So maybe from like a severe heroin addiction to 0. It's also very good at getting people from 0 to +10.
What are the +10 benefits that you see?
And I was treating him for opioid use disorder. And he said, Trevor, when I walked in here, I was an atheist. And now I know there's a God.
I've been obsessed with becoming superhuman basically like my entire life. And Ibogaine is pretty much the strongest tool I've found.
Silicon Valley CEOs are going to be microdosing Ibogaine.
Not only does it give intelligence, but it seems to give wisdom.
Welcome to Becoming Superhuman. We interview pioneers of human potential on becoming superhuman and on building an epic future for humanity. Today, we're honored to welcome Trevor Millar. He's the co-founder of Ambio Life Sciences in Baja, California, and he's treated over 3,000 people with Ibogaine, one of the most powerful psychedelics in existence. Trevor's clinic is pushing the frontiers of science, where they've partnered with Stanford to study the novel Ibogaine protocol for special operations vets with traumatic brain injuries. This was recently published in Nature magazine. He's also been featured in numerous podcasts and documentaries and has founded multiple organizations and is a leading figure in bringing this life-altering medicine to the world.
Ibogaine's not fun. So what was your first Ibogaine experience?
In 2001, I moved to Vancouver and I saw a shop across the road on Commercial Drive one day called the Urban Shaman. And I'm like, whoa, I know what shamans do. What's this shop all about? And it was a shop that sold somewhat legal entheogens within Canada. So Salvia divinorum was something that was on the menu at that point, which was still legal there. That was actually what I bought the first time I walked in. But this shop had a
truly unpleasant psychedelic experience,
bonkers. Oh,
which is why it's legal.
Yeah, that's a crazy drug.
And that was actually the first psychedelic that I tried. Thank you, Dilan.
Wow.
We were roommates, and he's like, "Hey, you want to try this?" Yeah, and I was like, "Why would anyone do psychedelics? This is awful."
There's the history of Ibogaine is so rich and so kind of varied, which is something very unique. Like you said, it was used in Gabon for a long time in the Bivichi tradition, and before this guy, as you said, discovered this for heroin addiction as a treatment in 1960s. For about 30 years, this was used for performance enhancement in France, it was athletes actually used to use this, and I'd love to get into that later, microdosing Ibogaine. But and then the molecule itself is really unique. Trevor, maybe you can talk to that a little bit. Ibogaine, a lot of psychedelics attached to one or two receptors in the brain. Like mushrooms, it's like the HTA receptors, and like maybe ketamine, the NMDA receptors. Ibogaine is just like attaches to kind of everything, and also produces this this other molecule called neuroibogaine. What have you learned about the kind of the complexity of this molecule and how it kind of interacts with humans?
I think neuropharmacologists or pharmacologists would call Ibogaine a dirty molecule, meaning that it doesn't hit just one receptor site. It hits multiple receptor sites, whether it's dopamine, whether it's the opioid receptor, whether it's GABA, whether it's serotonin. It's hitting multiple receptor sites. And I think rather than calling it a dirty molecule, I really liked what Dr. Nolan Williams from Stanford said, is that it really unleashes a symphony within the body. And he called it the most sophisticated molecule that he's ever encountered. So yeah, Ibogaine acts as a neurological reset. Ibogaine is unlike other psychedelics. It's multi-receptor. It's physiologically demanding. It often works in a single high impact session. It creates changes in the EEG brain waves. It's basically the latest study out of Stanford that we did in conjunction with them. The latest paper on that study shows that the EEG brain waves after Ibogaine basically look the same as if you've had a long-term meditation practice. Before and after, the changes are pretty dramatic. So
And
yeah, it's a
what brain centers
remarkable
do you see
molecule.
those? What are the brain centers where you see those changes?
I don't know this. Well, I know that the frontal cortex lights up. I know that from the first the neuroimaging part of the Stanford study has not been published yet, but I'm told that
Oh,
the
okay.
the frontal cortex lights up like it's brand new, like a baby's. The EEG has much more pronounced theta waves. So that's the brain waves that you get after having a long-term meditation practice. Like as soon as I read this study, that was my inclination. I'm like, this looks like a meditator's brain. And then I had a call with the woman who actually wrote the study. I'm like, is this correct? She said, that's exactly what I thought as well, is it looks like somebody's brain after they've had a long-term meditation practice.
And on top of that, your clinic particularly has maybe the only license in the world to use the raw ibogaine extract, which is richer than the kind of the synthesized chemical that is used by a lot of other providers. Is my understanding, and it's an even more complex experience. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So not exactly. So the full story there is my business partner, Jonathan Dickinson. He owns a company called Terranosis, which provides ibogaine to many of the ibogaine providers around the world. He has been granted the first ever license to export iboga legally out of Gabon. There was a moratorium on iboga going out of Gabon because it was being poached. There's a wonderful nonprofit called Blessings of the Forest, which was doing what they could to bring attention to that, and they got the Gabonese government to shut down any exportation. And then Jonathan has been granted the first license to take wood out of that country. So that the first, I want to say 10 kilograms or so of that was sent to Vancouver a couple of years ago and turned into a full spectrum iboga product, kind of a purified total alkaloid, because the iboga plant contains ibogaine and about a dozen other alkaloids. And that batch of medicine, we basically had that to use for a couple of months. And the next 20 kilograms or so, something fell apart with the lab that Jonathan had been working with. So he is now working with another institution to try and turn the next batch into this purified total alkaloid or something similar. In the meantime, we are all using the same ibogaine that we've used for a decade or more, which is from another plant called Voconga africana, which does not have sustainability issues and has a molecule very similar to ibogaine that with a simple chemical process can be converted into pure ibogaine. So that is ultimately what we still use is pure ibogaine, but in the future we should have more of this kind of full spectrum stuff, which you'd have to be a pretty sophisticated ibogaine eater to tell the difference. Like even taking the exact same medicine from 1 week or from one experience to the other, could it feel entirely different? Could be completely different. So some people feel as though the more alkaloids, kind of the more spiritual it is. And I had a funny experience with that. Like I used to work with when I was working in Vancouver with this medicine, I used to work with total alkaloid all the time, along with ibogaine. And I had one guy come through and he's like, I'm a pretty spiritual guy. I'd really like to have that total alkaloid. He was coming off of opiates and we had a multi-day dosing protocol for opiates at the time. It's like, I'm a pretty spiritual guy. I'd like to have that that total alkaloid. I'm like, all right, man. I gave him that medicine. He had a very hard time because spiritual does not necessarily mean easier. Spiritual could mean the opposite of easier. So he got kind of dragged through it for a day. And the next day, I'm like, you want to just try some Ibogaine? He's like, yeah, let's go with Ibogaine. He had an easier day the second day. So yeah,
Trevor, I got to meet you in person, at least for the first time, when I did Ibogaine last year, or and that was an absolutely life-changing experience, and just the Ibogaine experience, as well as how your clinic approached it, which included working with the therapist before we even got there, and then flying to Tijuana, and then there's like a multi-step process that included what do you call it? What's the thing that we did?
The sweat lodge.
Sweat, we started with a sweat lodge, and then a lot of kind of training and information sharing, and a lot of blood tests, right? Like I had never been poked as many times, like so many blood draws during that time. You guys really take care of your patients, and then the experience itself that lasted something like, I want to say, the crux of the experience was about 8 hours, but then the full experience was like 36 hours. Followed by an incredible 5-MeO experience, and then and I came back, and I probably had like the most positive and most like anxiety-free 8 months of my life almost, right?
Wow.
And that was just absolutely incredible. And then my wife did the same thing, and she had a very similar experience, and some of our friends, and so we're super grateful for what you're creating out there. I'd love for you to explain to our listeners why. How do you guys think about the kind of the entire protocol? Why all these steps, and how do they kind of come together to create the effect?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And congratulations. I'm so glad it was so effective for you and your loved ones. So yeah, set and setting are the two terms that come up all the time around psychedelic therapy. The setting is the place that you do it. So I think that's one thing we're very good at, is providing a very comfortable kind of 5-star environment with incredible food. We've come to be known for our food, how good it is. And the set refers to the mindset that you go into the journey with. So there's a lot we can do for that mindset even before arrival. So you mentioned the therapy ahead of time. We call that coaching. We have, I think we have 19 coaches that work for us. Most of them are licensed therapists. All of them have gone through at least a psychedelic coaching course. And you'll get a couple of 1-hour sessions with them prior to arrival. And that's to help you set the intention, how to kind of have proper expectations when you come in, so that your mindset is just getting into the right place so that you can properly receive the medicine. And then upon arrival, most people just fly into San Diego, which is easy for most Americans and Canadians to get to. And we'll pick everybody up near the airport, bring them down. Upon arrival, we'll get to know each other a little bit. We'll go into some food. I'll start preparing everybody for the Ibogaine journey. And then, yes, that first afternoon, we'll go to that Temazcal, the traditional Mexican sweat lodge, which is a great way to kick off the week. I look at it as there are 3 peaks to the week. This is the first of the 3 peaks, and it's another way to get in line with another theme of the week, which is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So the sweat lodge kind of spurs people towards that as well. Then you get an IV that night. That would have been one of the pricks that we gave you. You get an IV to rehydrate after the sweat lodge. Then first thing the next morning, we do a blood draw for blood work. You get an EKG upon arrival as well, and we asked you for an EKG prior to arrival. We actually asked for blood work prior to arrival now, which we didn't do when you were here. And then into breakfast, into breath work. We find breath is like an untapped ally. It's very good to get reacquainted with prior to doing something like Ibogaine. So people find that helpful. That's into another preparation circle, into lunch, then fast after lunch for the afternoon, some one-on-one preparation in the afternoon, along with a massage. Then we go in with Ibogaine at about 8 p.m. that night, and then that will go through that second night into the third day, which is largely a day of recovery. Then the day after, some yoga in the morning, some breakfast, into a debrief on the Ibogaine experience and a preparation for the 5-MeO-DMT experience. 5-MeO-DMT being another compound that we work with that seems to go very well with Ibogaine, helps people recover a lot quicker after Ibogaine, and has its own benefits for sure. And then once everybody's done 5-MeO-DMT, we'll have tacos that night because, hey, you're in Mexico. And then we get you back to San Diego the next morning. So that's basically the protocol on site. And then we also provide 2 coaching sessions afterwards for integration. Integration really being, how can you take the insights and the gifts that the psychedelic experience has given you and implement it into your life to make the most use out of it and see the most benefit from it.
So in researching this a little bit, and speaking to a coach who helps with Ibogaine, I was asking a question like, well, how do you know, like, when is it over? And they said it's sort of like being raped by a bear. It's over when the bear says it's over. And so when I hear this, right, there's that, there's being pricked by needles multiple times. There's the discomfort of the sweat lodge. Like, why go through all this deep discomfort?
It's crazy,
Trevor,
right? It's so crazy.
Got you there shaking your head.
Like I do,
And
I try.
So I thought maybe you could share with us, because you have so many incredible stories of people who have just had unbelievable transformations. Maybe you can share with us a specific story of why someone chose to go through all of that and what was their experience at the end.
Yeah, it just cracks me up hearing you say that. I remember I've been looking for it ever since, and I can't find it. But there's a meme that I saw once of it, and it basically puts personalities to different psychedelics, and it's a little fun kid for a mushroom or something. It's a nice grandmother for ayahuasca or something, and then this Ibogaine comes in as this like guy in bondage gear, like ready to whip somebody. It's horrible. But another thing that makes me think of is Marcus Luttrell is the lone survivor. So he is a former Navy SEAL who went through this harrowing adventure where he was the only survivor. His team of 4, he was the only survivor. And then there was a helicopter crash involved in this Operation Red Wings. And I was on his podcast. He's a dear friend now, but I was on his podcast, and he said, Ibogaine's the hardest thing you'll ever do. And I'm like, no, that is bad for marketing for the lone survivor to say that it's the hardest thing he's ever been through. But he's a great example of why would people do this? And even I've done it 11 times now. I try and do it once a year just to remind myself what I'm doing to people. And there's been times when I remember one gray day in particular where I'm like, oh my God, this is stupid. I can't believe I do this to people. I don't need to do this every year. This is just ridiculous. This has got to stop. But the very next day, I felt like $1 million. And I'm like, oh, I'm definitely doing this again next year. And that's really why you do it, is you just feel great afterwards, no matter, depending on what's going on. Like maybe you are Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, and you survived one of the most harrowing, weeks a human being could imagine. He then moved into former Texas governor's, he was the Texas governor at the time, Rick Perry, moved into his mansion for a couple of years, and the Perrys tried to help him heal, kind of did everything conventionally to try and heal, got addicted to opioids because of his bad back, after being broken many times, falling down the mountain 4 times that day, as outlined in the movie The Lone Survivor and his book. And then he went and tried Ibogaine as kind of a last ditch thing. And all of a sudden, everything's better. He quit drinking. He started going to church every Sunday. No, people weren't scared of him anymore. He became a very gentle, loving human being that people want to spend time around. So there's like as was said earlier, there are multiple receptor sites that are hit when people take Ibogaine, and Ibogaine seems to be helping people on multiple levels. It is a very powerful negative pattern interrupter. So whatever you've got going on in your life that you would just like to break free of that pattern because you know it is no longer serving you, maybe an extreme example being something like a heroin addiction, Ibogaine can even help somebody off of heroin virtually overnight. What can it do for you? You know, is it a negative pattern in your thinking that you need to break up? Is it, is it a behavioral addiction like porn or like something like that? Ibogaine seems to be able to help people break up those negative patterns. It also seems to be helping people reverse traumatic brain injury. So this was the study that we did with Stanford. It has shown that Ibogaine really does heal the brain. It helps with trauma,
and this
traumatic
is the study that you did with Nolan Williams, right? I mean,
that's right.
The numbers in there are just remarkable. I don't know if I can challenge you to quote them off the top of your head.
And it was published in Nature Medicine, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge deal. So the study was 30 U.S. Special Forces veterans. They needed a traumatic brain injury to get into the study. They went to Stanford prior to coming to Ambio, which is the name of my clinic. I don't know if you said that yet. They got brain scans and a battery of other tests prior to coming to Ambio. Then they came here just for Ibogaine. They didn't do the 5-MeO because we were just looking at one signal. And then they went immediately back to Stanford following the treatment for more brain scans, more tests, and then they did a month follow-up as well. The pre-brain scans were
day 0, day 4 or 5, and then
That's
day
right.
30.
Day 0 brain scans, day 1 or 2 brain scans. That's right. And then day 4 they would have taken Ibogaine. Then basically day 7 they're getting brain scans again. Then 30 days after day 7 they're getting another set of brain scans. The pre-brain scans clearly showing traumatic brain injury, which basically shows up as a dark spot in an MRI where there's no blood flow. Post-Ibogaine, a lot of those TBIs are entirely reversed, if not, partially reversed, if not entirely reversed. The first study in Nature Medicine measured PTSD, depression, anxiety, and disability scores. All went from off the charts down to next to nothing after just one dose of Ibogaine. The really interesting one there was actually the disability score, which is the tests they do to measure how traumatic brain injury is impacting somebody. And immediately following the Ibogaine, that disability score didn't change much at all. 30 days after, those scores had all improved dramatically. So as you alluded to, Dilan, Ibogaine converts into noribogaine, which then stays in your system. People say anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. So the noribogaine stays in your system. Another aspect of Ibogaine is it seems to create growth factors that are present when we are young human beings. And GDNF and BDNF are neurotropic growth factors that seem to be upregulated after doing Ibogaine as well, and then have this cascade effect with positive feedback loops and neuroregeneration. But TBI is really
Sorry. Why don't you finish that thought, and then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that TBI really is the signature wound of the global war on terror. And Ambio has treated anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 veterans and first responders. We also have treated Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis cases. We have a neuroregenerative program where early case studies are really showing promise as far as that's concerned. And Brett Favre was actually one of our first neuroregenerative patients. He used Ibogaine to help him treat his Parkinson's disease as well.
Also, something you mentioned there is unique. Most psychedelic type medicine, like ketamine, for example, the effect size is largest right after the treatment and then kind of like diminishes over time. Whereas Ibogaine, the effect size is actually pretty weak right after the treatment and it's like increases over time, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah.
Trevor, in a world where Ibogaine is legal, what might the ideal protocol for Parkinson's look like?
Yeah, I like the way that you frame that because currently Ibogaine is not legal and therefore there are some hurdles that people need to face when we talk about something like microdosing. So microdosing is just
and to
taking
clarify,
a small...
it's legal. It's legal where you're providing it in Mexico. It's not legal in the U.S.
That's right.
Just for our
but
listeners
microdosing is something that you know, for Parkinson's disease, you ideally do every day. So that means somebody taking, you know, being able to acquire Ibogaine legally in the States or wherever they live so that they can take it every day. And that's ultimately what the ideal protocol would be that from what we've seen would be taking a smaller amount of medicine, maybe 5 to 8 milligrams per kilogram of Ibogaine while on site with somebody like Ambio. That kind of cleans the pipes out a little bit without blowing a person away. And then ideally at home, they are able to take anywhere from 5 to 40 milligrams of Ibogaine every single day to keep the levels of noribogaine up in the system and keep that growth factor going.
Where things will be 10 years from today with respect to using Ibogaine for preventative medicine, because you're seeing so many places that could be used.
Well, I think Ibogaine is a incredible medicine to microdose. Just a little bit of medicine every single day. I think it would ultimately help with, you know, people who were predisposed to something like Alzheimer's, predisposed to something like dementia, predisposed to Parkinson's. I think if you started microdosing or almost just, you know, supplementing with Ibogaine early on in life, I think you would probably change your trajectory if you were predisposed to any of those neurological disorders, even multiple sclerosis, perhaps. We have seen Ibogaine do remarkable things for MS, including reduce brain lesions from MS by 71% after using Ibogaine. That guy's a friend of mine. He no longer shows any symptoms of having MS. I have 2 other friends. They just happened to be friends who came down for Ibogaine for other reasons, but unbeknownst to me, they had been diagnosed with early onset MS. And after they went to their doctor following Ibogaine, both of those women no longer qualify as having multiple sclerosis anymore either.
I want to talk about some of the lesser known use cases and side effects of Ibogaine, and Ibogaine as a performance enhancer. I think, you know, with the namesake of our podcast, Becoming Superhuman, Ibogaine can literally be used to become superhuman in some ways, and has been. There's historical precedence there, right? So starting in 1930s France, for about 30 years in France, Ibogaine was sold over the counter as a pill called lambarine, and this was about 8 milligrams of Ibogaine per dose. People used to use this a few times a day, and this was quite popular with athletes, right? And there are reports of athletes getting physical strength and energy from microdosing ibogaine, and also kind of low level depression being cured, and so on. And this is again 30 years of data. People microdosing about 10 to or 8 to 30 milligrams of ibogaine a day. And I know this for a fact that this works because I've been doing this for like, I don't know, like almost a year now, it's helped me Ibogaine has dopamine reuptake inhibitor properties, and it kind of like gives you this sort of like more motivation and energy to get through your day, to really particularly get through like kind of tough moments, stressful moments. You're kind of like a little bit detached from those moments, and you just get to kind of cruise through and get do the thing that you need to do, and feel better on a day-to-day basis. So that's really fascinating, Trevor. I don't know if you have thoughts on ibogaine's use as a performance enhancer.
For sure. Overall, I love to say that Ibogaine is very good at getting somebody from -10 to 0. So maybe from like a severe heroin addiction to 0. It's also very good at getting people from 0 to +10. So there's definitely that performance enhancing aspect of it. And even to go back to the traditional use in the Bwiti culture, it's my understanding that they would take lower doses of iboga root bark and go out hunting. It seems to give people that extra level of focus. I always feel whenever I take ibogaine, I feel like I'm smarter. Like it's kind of like that limitless pill. My brain seems to function better. I seem to pick out patterns better. Yeah.
The feeling of ibogaine is actually similar to the feeling of modafinil, which is a very, very commonly used egoroid or insomnia medication, but commonly used by a lot of people as a performance enhancer because it also has mild dopamine reuptake inhibitor properties. And so this is actually like a point that I have not heard anyone really talk about much, that ibogaine can and has been used as a performance enhancer for 30 years in France, and it is like it's just like kind of, yeah, it's like another whole bucket of use cases for ibogaine.
It's true. Yeah, we get into the too good to be true territory with ibogaine
Right.
all the time, you know?
When you say that, Trevor, do you mean too good to be true, as in people will say that because
Yeah,
the results are that good?
that's right. Like when you start listing off all the benefits of ibogaine and the you know, another quick anecdote is the guy who was shot in the head but survived and came down with a cane because of his balance issues. He wore sunglasses because he was so light sensitive. He basically hadn't been out of his bedroom for 4 years, but sadly hadn't been able to make love to his wife for those 4 years since he was shot either. And he left Ambio. He left us his cane because he no longer needed it. He didn't need his shades anymore. And he went home and made love to his wife. And his life has never been the same. So like that just sounds too good to be true. And even the coming off opioids, like I see things that modern Western medical culture would deem impossible. Like we can take somebody off of opioids overnight without painful withdrawals and all the cravings disappear. So, that's remarkable because opioids is not there's some part of, well, these drugs are obviously destroying your life. Why don't you just stop? And that might be true for stimulants, might be true for alcohol, but it's not at all that easy with opioids because opioids gives you this horrible physical withdrawal that can last weeks, months, even years with post-acute withdrawal symptoms. So for somebody to in their mind, they're suffering the worst sickness they've ever felt, and all they have to do is just take one more oxy, and this will go away for another few hours. So it's incredibly hard to stop that pattern without ibogaine. But with ibogaine, it just falls away. It's ibogaine's never an easy thing, as we've discussed. It's got its own challenges, but it seems to be worth it to improve all these things.
You mentioned that it's really good at getting people from -10 to 0, but then also from 0 to 10. What are the +10 benefits that you see?
For sure. Well, we could look at, the spiritual benefits. We have treated more than one person who has told me, but one person very specifically, I'll never forget. I was treating him in Vancouver, and I was treating him for opioid use disorder. And he said, Trevor, when I walked in here, I was an atheist, and now I know there's a God. And to me, when I hear something like that, I'm like, the healing is complete. Like even the 12-step program, which some people have a hard time with for Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but step 1 is recognize that higher power. The reason why step 1 is because that's the most important thing. Like, what you are able to do with your life once you realize that there is a higher power that you can align yourself with for benefit, like that is when great things happen. Like, Martin Luther King aligned himself with a higher power. Gandhi aligned himself with a higher power. Jesus, of course. Rosa Parks. Like, these people found their courage and strength to make a difference in the world, a true difference in the world, through that alignment with the higher power. So I think something like that, to treat a CEO who might have everything going for him, but he's kind of miserable. He's not really getting a lot of juice out of life. And then, he's pretty much an atheist, doesn't really buy that mumbo jumbo. All of a sudden, he has a sacred experience with something like Ibogaine or 5-MeO-DMT. That changes everything.
I'd love to dive into this, Trevor. What that actually means. Unlike this gentleman, I was still an atheist after Ibogaine. However, I did walk away with this incredibly deep compassion towards kind of all humans, and that's something that has stayed with me since that day, and really kind of, speaking of higher power, it sort of like has given me a newfound sense of purpose, right? And like there's something that is greater than myself, even if it's not tied to an entity per se. There is something greater than myself that's worth working towards and worth contributing towards, right? And I actually saw this. With the staff at your center, I had conversations with people, and I was asking them, hey, like, what's the difference? Why do you? And I had never in my life felt so taken care of by a group of people, and everyone who works at your clinic are like so doing their work with so much heart and dedication. And I was asking them about like how Ibogaine contributed to this, and some mentioned that they have this same sense of compassion for everyone, and people talked about how their anger issues have been cured after Ibogaine. So this to me, it feels like another way that Ibogaine can help you almost become superhuman, kind of bring you closer to spirituality, whatever that means to you. Whether it's a kind of religion oriented thing, or like a kind of compassion oriented thing, whatever that is. And that's really beautiful.
For sure. So I would say that when I say higher power, you assumed I was talking about an entity. I'm not necessarily talking about an entity. I'm talking about a sense of greater connection to the world around them.
That's beautiful.
Which leads to compassion for your fellow human beings, like a certain oneness. Oh, wow, these people are struggling as well. How can I step in and help these people? That to me is a higher power. That is moving beyond yourself into connection with the web of life itself,
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that's kind of what happens. Like, it's
Trevor, is it possible that, like, we talk about all these gifts that Ibogaine has for humanity, from curing TBI to addiction to Parkinson's, but ultimately, like there's such a void of spirituality that's emerging, and so many people are struggling with these days. And I wonder if this is the greatest gift that Ibogaine can leave you with, right? Like the sense of connection and purpose and compassion, and this sort of like belief in something that's greater than yourself.
For sure. That's 100%. Like when I said I kind of washed my hands of this guy once he recognized that there was a higher power, that's what I mean. Like as soon as somebody knows that they can turn to a higher power for whatever it's going to take to bring them the next step, that's what's needed. That's, you know,
Yeah.
any help we seek for outside of ourselves, I think, is ultimately coming from that higher power anyway. And once you realize
Yeah.
you've got that connection to that greater thing, and you can go direct to that greater thing, then you are a self-reliant human being. Then
Yeah.
you become a force within nature, because you are tapped into the source of nature rather than, kind of bumbling around in the wilderness, as it were.
That point is actually really, really profound. I think what you're saying, that once you feel that connection to something greater than yourself, you are actually much more capable of being self-reliant. That's really
Absolutely.
profound.
I'd like to see us dive deeper on the religious side of things, but before we transition out of the topic of performance, I would be interested, Dilan, you also, in addition to that sense of compassion, you spoke about some specific benefits that you felt like I forget if you used the phrase that you felt like your clock speed had increased, or that your
Right.
probability weights were reset. Would you unpack your experience? And then Trevor, maybe you could
Yes.
comment on whether you've seen this with others.
Actually, I think it's worth going into a bit of detail, because before my Ibogaine experience, I tried to listen to all kinds of podcasts about the actual experience itself, and I didn't honestly find that many. So for our listeners, the Ibogaine experience, as Trevor described, the actual night of the experience, you take your medicine and you wait till the onset, and you have this sort of like about 8 hours of like an intense trip per se, where you're being medically monitored by doctors. You're hooked up to an EKG and all these things, and then so there's first of all there's the sort of the physical manifestation of that feeling being on Ibogaine, right? There's one of the most unique things I noticed was auditory hallucinations. You hear people talking to you. You hear this kind of like unique sounds that emerge, and I've never experienced this with any other psychedelic ever. And then and then you also have a sense of nausea. A lot of people end up vomiting, kind of like with ayahuasca. But also, if you try to walk around, say for example, go take a leak, you have this symptom that they call ataxia, where it feels like your nerves are misfiring, and you kind of like feel like kind of falling down on each step. And so the psychological experience itself is also quite unique. It starts there are hallucinations, like visual hallucinations, but very different from, at least in my case, very different from anything else I'd experienced. A lot of people describe a feeling of flying over like cities and structures and stuff like that. And this is very accurate. You feel like you're like almost like Superman, and you're like you're flying over things, right? And all this like visual imagery that appears in front of you that are really beautiful. And my kind of like internal explanation for this was that it almost felt like these are the base layers of my neural net that captures like kind of very basic shapes. If you look at a image recognition neural net, the lower layers are trained to capture very basic shapes, and sort of I felt like these layers were being unlocked within my brain. And the auditory hallucination also felt like the lower layers of whatever neural net that I have for recognizing speech was being unlocked, so that these kind of like fragments of speech was being released that I was perceiving as conversations. Another very often talked about unique experience about Ibogaine is its sort of like relationship with memory. Ibogaine seemed to unlock memories from kind of throughout your life, and a lot of people experience this as if their entire childhood, especially kind of like, powerful moments of their childhood, appearing in front of them, and remembering things that they had completely forgotten. Like, people describe it as watching a movie of you growing up or your childhood, and that was kind of true for me as well, and that was really powerful. And yeah, I was kind of like walking through my childhood home and seeing these details in great detail. And the last thing maybe here is that I had a unique experience. After some point, after kind of like this sort of observing all of this happening, I got really interested in the nature of the medicine, and I started thinking about, okay, like trying to experiment with like my own psyche and try to, try to like poke around with my own psyche and how things felt and whatnot. And I realized that, I could remember things much faster. It almost felt like my brain was working at a higher clock speed. I could synthesize ideas really, really, really fast, and have like, pretty elaborate thoughts in my head. But at the same time, I was also very forgetful. So I had to like, it was almost like running behind myself, trying to catch up to this train of thoughts, and you would just like, but then like you just like almost forget what you were thinking about. So while I was in the experience, I started developing mnemonics. And mnemonics are techniques for remembering, for listeners. So for example, you would tie a specific thought to a name or a tree or whatever, and then I would kind of like write down like the mnemonics in my notebook so that I could like, retrace my thoughts and reconstruct the thing that I was thinking about, as opposed to kind of getting lost in my own thoughts. So this was really fun. I had a really great time doing this all night. So
did that work for you?
That was my main experience. It worked great. It worked great.
That's
awesome.
I mean, Trevor, have you ever heard of anyone doing this? I mean, this is one of the reasons I love Dilan.
It's so like what you were describing, like getting these incredible ideas, getting them at rapid pace, and being like, oh my God, I got to remember that. And then 10 seconds later, you're like, I can't remember that because the next thing's coming. So the fact that you used a memory tree while you were on Ibogaine, that's just brilliant, man. That's incredible. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, that was really
so
cool.
here's the thing that I think is interesting, is one of my hypotheses about why generally psychedelics work, but specifically Ibogaine, is our last guest is sort of a legend in the world of neuroscience and dopamine and behavior, which was Judd Brewer. Right. And so he wrote a book on addiction and habit formation and things like that. And so the model that he has is essentially there's a trigger event, then you enact a behavior, and then there's a reward that happens. And you run that enough times, and then that turns into a habit. And if the habit isn't healthy for you, we call it an addiction. Right. And so to me, part of what I think is happening is the brain is running you through this process of remembering most of these formative memories, where you essentially replay the trigger, replay your behavior, but then you reevaluate the reward. And so you're making new meaning. You're like, oh, like responding with anger and yelling or hitting someone, that's not the way. It's actually this other way. And so you're sort of rapidly retraining your brain through this process. Now, I don't have a specific reason to believe that's true other than just observation, but that's...
No, I think that's completely true. That's, you might call that forgiveness, you're, to get into another spiritual term, like that's forgiveness. Like all of a sudden you are forgiving the meaning that situation used to have for you, so that all of a sudden it doesn't have the same charge anymore. And we always call Ibogaine forgiveness medicine. It really seems to be something that can help you forgive all that stuff that has been triggering your nervous system to react. malignantly, you know?
And now, Dylan, what about you took us through your journey during the Ibogaine. Now, what about the performance aspects afterwards? Did your brain continue to work at a higher clock speed with no memory, or did that change, or what?
That I think that effect definitely went away. So the gray day was interesting. Again, like not as much talked about in the experiences when people describe it. It is its own thing, right? Like after this like sort of 8 or so hour intense trip, you have 24 plus hours where you're sort of, it's hard to sleep, and you're sort of like, yeah, you're kind of like flooded with thoughts. You feel a certain amount of like physical discomfort, mental discomfort, but also it's I found it to be fascinating. Again, like it was really I was going back to some of the thoughts that I had during the experience, and thinking a lot about the nature of the experience itself, and the nature of the universe, and all kinds of stuff. So it was great, and I think coming out of Ibogaine, I would say fast forwarding, a week or months, my wife remarked that you're really happy, like you're just like kind of walking around just with a big smile on your face, and I honestly had to check in with myself and make sure that I'm not manic, right? Because I'm like is this a good thing? Like, because I'm feeling great, but is it actually a good thing? Am I is this mania, right? And I actually had to, like, I made sure to read up on symptoms of mania, and that I didn't have those symptoms, but it felt like that. It felt like almost like having a very light manic episode, and this is where, like, again, in terms of becoming superhuman, I personally believe that some of the most successful entrepreneurs, including my friends who are really successful, they're kind of like lightly manic, like nothing like nothing negative or whatever, like, bad shit happens. It's just like kind of they cruise through that. It doesn't stick to them. And my post Ibogaine many months did feel like that, where I was oblivious of the at least the I was not attached to the stressful things that were happening that I had to deal with, and as a result, I was functioning way better at my job. So yeah, that was a really interesting side effect.
As a caveat, like, you seem to, Dylan, get the real full meal deal with Ibogaine, as far as all the visions, the sounds, the flying, the repairs happening, the memory tree. That's insane. But some people don't get any visions, and that's okay too. Like, Ibogaine seems to go where people need it, and sometimes that means maybe they're working on your big toe or something, and they don't need to give you visions. I almost feel as though sometimes the visions are just distractions to keep you entertained while the Ibogaine is in doing whatever else it needs to do. So
that's actually a really valid point, because the from the data that from the studies you've done, Trevor, with Stanford, the effect size is completely uncorrelated with whether people had visions or not, right? So that's important to remember, because if just because you didn't have visions, that does not mean the medicine is not doing its work.
Exactly. I'm not a visual Ibogaine tripper at all. I do seem to get insights, but I'm not getting them through a visual cortex response at all.
Do you think we're going to see a world where in 10 years the cool thing will be, or maybe even next year, all the Silicon Valley CEOs are going to be microdosing Ibogaine?
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, we're starting the trend.
Not only does it give, does it give intelligence, but it seems to give wisdom. I think it's going to be harder to do things that might not be aligned with what's best for the greater good.
I love this, Trevor, that we're kicking off Becoming Superhuman rebrand with this episode with you and with Ibogaine, because I've been obsessed with Becoming Superhuman basically like my entire life, and Ibogaine's pretty much the strongest tool I've found, and so
nice.
So Ben, we might have a bunch of CEOs microdosing.
Yeah. They're all going to be following in your footsteps. steps, Dylan.
the big dose is where it's at. So you cleaned the
Yeah,
pipes out
agreed.
first with that big dose, and
Absolutely
then the
agreed. Yeah,
microdose has the
Yeah.
power.
yeah.
I mean, without naming names, have you had some big Silicon Valley CEOs and executives do work with you?
Yes.
Has that been for healing or for performance?
I think for both. Like I think my friend Dr. Gabor Mate wrote a book called The Myth of Normal. And the myth of normal, the title refers to the fact that we're all traumatized, like growing up in this world where everything is so discombobulated and stressful and everybody's fighting and nobody has a purpose and nobody's aligned with each other, tons of competition, not much cooperation, horrible childhoods, the media's garbage. Like, if this is normal, we're not doing very well. Like, I have another spiritual teacher who talks about, peace shouldn't be the goal of your spiritual journey. Peace should be the starting point. Like, it takes just peace would be normal. So I feel like these CEOs are coming here because they've got the same kind of shitty trauma that all of us have, and they want to be better at their gig,
This is actually, I love this because if you want to pick a fight, like a friendly fight, here, a few people that I look up to and admire a lot, including Mark Andreessen. Again, like a huge fan of Mark Andreessen. But there was this sort of like Twitter trend recently where a bunch of people were tweeting about, how some VCs were tweeting about, including Mark, that some of their portfolio founders would do ayahuasca and then they would like decide that they didn't want to be a CEO and like, go off and there was like the idea was that how some of this medicine was a net negative for society because people would like kind of stop being committed to their work. I completely and strongly disagree with this take. Now, it is possible that, I mean, again, they didn't talk about Ibogaine specifically, but it is possible that a few people who were, working hard because they were really unhealthy inside, and Ben, you and I both know some such people. Maybe they stopped working hard after doing medicine. I personally have the exact opposite experience. Ibogaine, specifically Ibogaine, but like really all psychedelics I've ever done, has only motivated me more to work more and like work for like really like it's I personally find that if you're working, if you're doing your work for selfless reasons, so to speak, not that everyone's, I don't want to make some like kind of a claim of like being better than or whatever, but like if you just like, if you're working because it's coming out of compassion, right? Coming out of wanting to create something beautiful or great in the world, like that's just like, I find that fuel to be so much stronger than any other kind of like egocentric fuel that I would otherwise rely on. And Ibogaine has only helped me extract more meaning out of life and double down and commit to my work, as opposed to wanting to retire and like become something else or whatever. So yeah, again, love Mark Andreessen, but disagree with this.
I think on that note, like for one, we tell people don't make any major life decisions after doing something like Ibogaine or ayahuasca. For two, I have seen ayahuasca do that way more than Ibogaine, kind of, and I've seen people regret the decisions that they have made after ayahuasca. I can think of one guy in particular who, came out of the closet, quit his job, left his family, all because of one ayahuasca journey. And, he had some regrets about the way he did that. Maybe it still would have been good to do in the long run, but just the way he did it, it happened a little quickly. And that's just one of many stories I've heard like that. But I feel like to me, I heard a former Ibogaine provider say he was featured in a movie. His name's Dimitri. He's in a movie called I'm Dangerous with Love, which was all about his providing Ibogaine. And he was speaking on a panel after a screening of this movie. And somebody said, what's the difference between iboga and ayahuasca? And he said, iboga is a root. It comes from earth. It seems to bring you to things of your ancestry. It seems to help you make your things on earth better. And, I will add to that iboga doesn't seem to necessarily be an ego destroyer. It seems to more be an ego repairer and make it more effective and in alignment with what's good for the individual. And that's my add-on. And then he said, and ayahuasca, it's from outer space. And it does kind of feel like that, like ayahuasca is kind of out there and cosmic and
So,
hard.
Well, and
not-
that's
where
I
iboga
think
really
we're-
isn't that freaky.
I think we're breaking some serious new grounds here. This is a really interesting conversation. I've done ayahuasca twice. I'm kind of a fan, but not like a huge fan. I didn't get a lot out of it. I'm actually going to be super vulnerable here and share something that I've never told anyone. My second ayahuasca trip, the sort of download I got, right, and I didn't share this with anyone, was that I should break up with my girlfriend at the time. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. And I obviously came out of it and evaluated, the so to speak download, and I didn't trust it. I didn't take action on it. But that was a download. And that girlfriend is now my wife, and the person I love the most in the world, and the greatest treasure in my life. And just we have the most incredible relationship. And so again, Upeka, if you're hearing this for the first time on the podcast, and you are hearing this for the first time on the podcast, I'm sorry about that. But
That's beautiful.
But yeah, so I mean, I don't know. This is not a diss on ayahuasca by any means. I have many friends who are huge fans of ayahuasca. Didn't do a lot for me. And this one download that I got, I didn't take action on, and I'm really glad that I didn't. So maybe Mark Anderson has a point there. But the same thing definitely does not apply to Ibogaine.
I know, but I will meet that and give it counterbalance, because I have had Ibogaine tell me to break up with my girlfriend. And I feel like it's one of the greatest things that it's ever done for me. And my answer to it at the time was, fuck you. There is no way. And it has made me value her so much more, because it made me realize that I am deciding every day to be with this woman. And therefore, what can I do to make our relationship even better? I did tell her afterwards, and it was a very hard process for us to go through, but it made us commit to each other even more. Well, let's up level more. Let's
fucking love
show this wrong.
This is so important, right? So important, because oftentimes people talk about these medicines as if it's just like it's telling you some profound truth that you must not ignore, and I think this is such an important point, right? The message is coming from your own psyche, right? And it is really important that you take it and then you evaluate it as a rational human, right? And sometimes it might be the best correct message, and sometimes it might not be, right? And it's not like the medicine's responsible for you're doing some kind of making a terrible decision after because you just didn't think it through, right? And so I think it's really important, Trevor, what you're saying, as a facilitator especially. You're saying it's okay to tell fuck you to Ibogaine and make the decision that you actually it's actually right for you.
This plant is not my god, this is the helpful
and no plant
ally,
is. Yes.
And no plant is. And so one of the things we tell our guests now that you probably didn't hear when you first came through, because we've learned along the way, is something another spiritual teacher I heard that just makes total sense, is truth brings relief. It might be at first oh shit, that's going to be really hard, but that after you take that action, you are going to feel relief because it's the right thing. So that's one thing we coach now, is truth brings relief. And I think the other thing, Ibogaine for sure, and probably other psychedelics, is they have the potential to teach through contrast. Like I have had people go through Ibogaine journeys that just experienced their family be murdered over and over again in multiple ways. And they're like, what was that? And I'm able to say, remember it teaches through contrast? Aren't you freaking glad you're not there anymore? How much more are you going to value your family now that you've been through that 12K HD experience of murder again and again? So yeah, there's definite nuance to these medicines, and I highly advise people to not take dramatic action after they're given some out of left field advice from a silly plant, you know.
I can't appreciate this enough. Too many podcasts and too many kind of like people advise hinges too much on kind of like whatever the downloads, and that's not the point. But the point is for you to be a rational human still.
Well, exactly. And to me that there's this other quality that we sometimes talk about, for example, with ketamine, has an addictive quality, particularly I think for entrepreneurs and smart people, where you have the experience of having an insight. And we were talking with Jonathan Schooler about this, who's a psychologist here at UC Santa Barbara. And there's a somatic feeling of what it's like to have an epiphany or an insight. And that can be generated independent of actually having true insight. And so sometimes ketamine can do that, where you're going, oh my God, I'm figuring it out. And that you're getting that positive body sensation of figuring it out, but you actually haven't. And I think that's a thing that can trick you. And so what I appreciate you doing, Dilan, is just grounding it back into sense making, and that you were principled enough to do that with Upeka. So, but also to me, I'm
like just putting two and two together that Upeka's your wife now. I'm just putting it together. Oh, cool. Right on. She's awesome. Right on.
Yeah.
Cannabis can do the same thing, right? Like you can have these profound insights on cannabis, and then you can't do jack shit with them. Because it's almost like it gives you the insight without giving you the willpower, or even stealing the willpower to do the thing. So you have to be super careful. At the same time, I feel as though cannabis has been a huge ally for me in my life, and especially on my spiritual path. I have not had it since December 31st, 2024, personally, because I also see its dark side. But this is what I'm talking about. Like it can give you the insight. And I've actually had a freaking ketamine problem too. That's one of the gifts COVID gave me. At the same time, I found a great ketamine dealer, and Brianne and I were doing copious amounts of ketamine. And it was my birthday, January 6, 2021. I'm just like, all right, enough of this. Like this is out of control. But yeah, like these things, ketamine, especially because it's the danger in ketamine is you can't immediately see the diminishing returns. Like at least with cannabis, you're getting fat because you're eating too much with the munchies. You can't, you're sleeping too much. You don't have energy. Ketamine, it takes a long time to see the diminishing returns. To me, the diminishing returns is I started feeling metallic. And yeah, it's hard to recognize you have an issue, and it can be performing enhancing.
This thing that you're saying, Trevor, being able to understand the message on your own terms, right? It's applicable to spirituality and religion as well. I think it's worth highlighting, right? So I remember during my Ibogaine experience at your clinic, after Ibogaine, actually we did the 5-MeO experience, and there were 6 of us, and one thing I noticed is that the at the depth of the 5-MeO experience, where it's like it's described as complete ego death, what each person saw was quite different, right? And it seemed like it was very much primed by their prior beliefs. So for me, it was a vision of like kind of the birth of the universe, right? So I'm like, I don't know, a physics background, science guy, so like kind of like universe is formating, right? And whereas someone else described their experience was like they saw the Holy Trinity, right? Like they were in front of like Jesus and Mother Mary and so on, right? And it makes sense. And I think it's important to appreciate that that even when it comes to spirituality and religion, whatever you have been primed with in the past plays a large role in how you get the message, and that doesn't necessarily mean what you're seeing is the literal truth. What it means is that it is sort of like a directional connection for yourself, right? We do know of people, at least have heard of people who have done not ibogaine but like other plant medicine, and they sort of like take the vision as the literal thing, and then sort of like they kind of a little bit go off, kind of go off societies, kind of disappear and like kind of end up in the wilderness or whatever, and that's I think it is important to emphasize that again, even in the spiritual realm, come out of it and spend some time interpreting whatever you got, and like not literally, but is it aligned with your values, and does that, so
5-MeO is a tricksy one that way, because 5-MeO in particular can really kind of see the divinity in things, and for you that was maybe the Big Bang, the start of the universe. That's a divine moment. That's the what's the line for the materialist? They only, people that appreciate the Big Bang, they only needed one miracle. You need one miracle of everything coming from nothing. Then I can materially figure everything out from there. Anyway, I'd say yes, we see everything through our own filters, and the thing with 5-MeO is because it can bring you to this level of divinity and profound realization around divinity, it's like, I am God. And then you get almost this messianic complex that can come out of it. Whereas I like to be there for those and say, yes, we are all God. Like, you are not special in this. It's where you think it's where you think you are special in this that we start getting a lot of issues arise.
Yeah, this area of priming, I actually think, is one from a protocol standpoint. Like, people know that's important, right? That's the set and setting. And yet I still think that that's underweighted. Like, the years ago when I did 5-MeO, we went to this nurse, and we wanted to do it we were doing it at her place, and it was like a little apartment, but there was a beautiful deck outside, and we said, well, we'd like to do it outside. And she goes, well, I really don't want to do it outside, because half the people that do this, they take their clothes off.
Oh, God.
And I just, like, now I didn't end up taking my clothes off, but you don't experience half the people taking their clothes off, right?
Far less than
I took
1%.
most of my clothes off.
Some people do feel
really
some people do feel like they just want to they want to be free, and then
you're the exception.
It happens.
My point in this, I mean, she was,
people want to at least take their shirt off, but then I'll be like, keep those shorts on. What do you mean? Well, and I've got, well, why? I'm like, you'll be really happy in 15 minutes that you kept those shorts on. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the thing, right? So you have 1%. She experienced 50%, and so, like, that's a huge delta. And it's because my theory is one of the last things that you hear before you blast off is 50% of people take their clothes off, and so you've just primed that thought right into their mind. And so these things actually matter so much more than you realize. And so when I work with clients who work with psychedelics, we really sculpt what are they thinking about and focusing on before their journey, because you're sort of preloading all of those things into your brain to shape that experience. And so my curiosity is from hearing Dilan's report, that you guys tell people they're going to meet God, and then therefore they do. And Dilan met the Big Bang, of course.
Yeah. We definitely don't tell people they're going to meet God. We definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or is
No.
how is it that
that's
sort of
me right
language
now talk bullshit with you guys. Like, people often do. I'm just saying that overall, that's my experience, is people come back with some sense of the divine, whether it's a sense of unity, whether it's merging with the white lights, whether it's,
Yeah.
but yeah, it seems to be.
Ambio is just like I just like I really want to appreciate your professionalism is off the charts. Like when it comes to all of this, like, you know, whether it's priming or taking care of people or care before and after, it's unbelievable.
You know what we'll say, like, just specifically into the 5-MeO, the preparation we do, and what we used to do is we used to say, you might feel like you're going to explode, just explode. You might feel like you're going to die, just die. And there's a primer for you, telling, anybody who's experienced ego death knows it can be a beautiful thing. But if you're being told you're going to feel like you're dying, that's a scary freaking thing. So what we do now is we say, Ibogaine is still very much a dualistic type experience. It's you and it's everything else. It's you and it's the room you're in. It's you and the visions you might be seeing. But like regular life, it's you and it's everything else. Whereas 5-MeO is more of a non-dualistic type experience. And what I mean by that is, it's as if you were a drop of water or a drop of rain, and all of a sudden you get to experience yourself as the whole ocean for just a few minutes. So you're setting aside this smaller sense of identity to take on a greater sense of identity for just a few minutes. And I think that is ontologically accurate and doesn't prime people any which way. There's going to be some layer of that onion. You are coming into a greater sense of self on some level with 5-MeO, pretty much guaranteed. And that's as much as we like to color it.
Yeah. I mean, my experience was very much that I experienced myself as a vibration, like a sound wave almost, in an infinite sea of sound waves. And the metaphor for me was that, I'm so infinitesimally small, but I'm this essential part of this vast symphony that is the universe. And that if I wasn't there, it would be a different song.
Beautiful. That's it. Did you keep your clothes on?
Yeah, I did keep my clothes on.
Good for you.
Unlike Dilan.
I recommend at least taking your shirt off. It's very nice to touch your own skin.
We've talked about one sort of contrarian belief just around not viewing the medicine as a god. And I'm curious, what other contrarian beliefs might you hold about psychedelics, and why?
The first thing that's coming to mind is, I once read an article in Forbes magazine by a journalist I actually know quite well from back in Vancouver, but she was interviewing some other doctor from some other clinic that provided Ibogaine. And he said it was 3 myths on Ibogaine. I can't remember 2 and 3, but the number 1 myth was, in his mind, that Ibogaine was a hallucinogenic, that it caused hallucinations. And he said it wasn't, and had some other kind of highfalutin definition for what Ibogaine was. But I have seen people hallucinate more convincingly on Ibogaine than any other psychedelic by far. They can be absolutely convinced something is happening when nothing of the sort is happening. And we've seen it again and again, to the point where we even now got, we have a stuffed animal, a bear at each house that we introduce before anybody takes medicine. And rather than um, telling somebody, hey, you're paranoid, or hey, you are hallucinating, or hey, you are stuck in a feedback loop, we have this teddy bear that we now call Loopy the Bear. And if somebody is showing symptoms of being stuck in some kind of a negative feedback loop, we will hand them Loopy the Bear as the reminder that you're just stuck in a thing and it will pass.
What is the single most important insight that you wish everyone could take away from an Ibogaine experience?
The beautiful thing about these substances, whether it's Ibogaine or other psychedelic substances, is I don't feel as though they're bringing anybody some missing piece of the puzzle. And all of a sudden, once I get this piece of this puzzle, I'm finally going to be complete. I feel as though it's more like as we live life, we suffer traumas, and it's like we're seeing life through a pane of glass or a filter. And as we suffer these heartaches, as we stub our toe, even as we're betrayed, that filter gets dirty, and we get it so dirty that we don't even recognize it's dirty anymore. And I think what these substances do is they don't bring you that missing piece of the puzzle. They just clean that glass from the inside out. So then you're seeing life properly again. And it's once you're seeing life through an undirtied filter that you're like, actually, life is awesome. I've got everything I need. I am connected to something greater, and I am grateful to be alive. And I think that's an incredible gift of these compounds, is they show people what people already have inside of them.
Yeah, beautifully said. So it's cleaning the glass. And then the other thing that I was interested to ask you, Trevor, is it's something that you guys put emphasis on, and others do too, which is the integration and the importance of the integration. That Ibogaine isn't this instant cure-all, but it gives you this opportunity, right? And so if for anyone that's finishing a journey, whether it was Ibogaine or another psychedelic, if there was, say, a 7-day challenge or just some habit or something that they could take on for each day that would really amplify their long-term benefit, what might that be?
I think if there was any one thing, I think meditation is something you should really get behind. The second study out of Stanford that measured people who came down here was an EEG study, and the brain after Ibogaine looks as though it is the brain of a meditator. So how do you prolong the effects of Ibogaine? Meditate some more so that those results stick around. And then we talk about, and our preparation and integration guide that we published goes deeper into this, but I call it a 5 to Thrive. What are 5 things you could do every day after Ibogaine to make sure that you're putting your life in the right direction? It probably has something to do with meditation, exercise, eating right, maybe learning something.
Yeah.
And I think the 5 to Thrive, the challenge that we invite people to there is for 90 days, 5 days a week after your Ibogaine journey, try and do your 5 to Thrive every single day, because these substances are incredibly good at helping people interrupt negative patterns, but then a vacuum is created. What are you going to fill that vacuum with? That's what integration is.
One question that I have for you around this is, after seeing so many people go through these experiences of having a different relationship with their consciousness and different relationship with reality, I'm curious, what is your definition of consciousness?
Need to give credit to not only these medicines, but also my own personal spiritual journey and the digging in I have done to ideas around this. And I think the best definition, I guess, if we're going to give it a definition of what consciousness is is consciousness is the sense of I am. If you close your eyes and you shut down all of the thoughts, you are still going to have a sense of beingness, the sense that I am. And I think that every single living and maybe unliving, as far as we're concerned, entity that we know of has that same sense of I am. And I think that is probably our highest and lowest common denominator. It is my estimation that the unadulterated sense of I am within me is the exact same unadulterated sense of I am that is in you and everything else. It is that one sense of I am that bifurcates into every living thing in the universe. And what did the burning bush say to Moses when Moses asked its name? The bush said that I am that I am. I am that I am that's behind everything. And another tidbit is that burning bush was actually an acacia bush. Acacia contains DMT if you smoke it. So a burning acacia bush, maybe there's a little DMT action going in Moses' insight there. And DMT, especially 5-MeO DMT, which is a different compound, but it really, for me, it really does bring you to that sense of I amness as well.
Well, and that also was one of the traditions for the Hebrews back when they had the temples. They would burn acacia wood in the inner sanctum, the priest would, and they would stay in there until they were smoked out, and then they would go outside, and then they would tell everyone what God had told them, or quote unquote God.
I didn't know that piece of it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, but since we are sort of transitioning to talk about God a little bit here, one of the things that we're curious about is in seeing thousands of people go through these journeys, many of them people of faith, how do you see Ibogaine interacting with existing faith frameworks? Does it deepen people's faith? Do they come to question it? What are the patterns that you notice there?
Yeah, I feel like it really meets people where they're at spiritually. I've known plenty of Christian who has bumped into Jesus on their journey. I'm thinking of one Muslim gentleman that I treated. He was actually the imam at his mosque. He had never had a drink before in his life, but his doctor got him hooked on oxys unknowingly, and he had a horrible opioid addiction. Came in for treatment, and his vision on Ibogaine was that he was running towards God with a briefcase, and then he tripped and the briefcase opened and it was empty. And he all of a sudden realized the mechanical religion he was practicing was not spiritual at all and was empty without what he gained afterwards, which was this incredible spiritual knowing and compassion and an actual sense of divinity rather than the rote kind of mechanisms of the religion that he was practicing. I've had a gentleman come to a place in his iboga journey where he was being shown all of these religious symbols and iconography that basically was implying that all of these pathways have validity. And he said, okay, cool. Can I see Jesus? And the medicine said, nope. Well, why not? Because he's busy. So, Ibogaine has a sense of humor as well. Another awesome one was a paramedic who saves people for a living. He was sitting outside after the Ibogaine speaking to another guy who went through it with him. And he's like, yeah, I met Jesus last night. I saved him. Oh, yeah? How did that go? It felt completely unnecessary. But his vision was he came across Jesus. Jesus was in a river. He goes over to pull Jesus out of the river. Then Jesus is floating away going, like kind of like, I'm the guy that walks on water, dude. Like, let me take care of it. I'll take care of you, you know? So yeah, there's been but so many, you know, I'd say the person that has to watch out is somebody that is really committed to their atheism. I think people who do not need to worry are people who already have some sense of faith. And yes, I think it's only going to deepen. Like Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, hasn't missed a Sunday at church since his first time doing Ibogaine.
Well, and I'm also curious what you're seeing, because we are seeing this sort of resurgence of faith, and also what we think is maybe this emergence of some sort of new religion or new spirituality that's, you know, or what some have called the spiritual but not religious, and is being sort of born here between psychedelics and different types of meditation, things like that. And I'm curious what you're observing within this frame of sort of new religion.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think new would be a relative term. I would say like even Aldous Huxley, Aldous Huxley was affected by psychedelics for sure, but he wrote a book called The Perennial Philosophy, I believe is the title, but it essentially looks at the seeds of truth within all of these different spiritual traditions. And he called that the perennial philosophy, that all of these traditions are trying to get us to the same place. Essentially, I would surmise that place is recognize the divinity within all of us, or the Christ consciousness within all of us, or the Buddha nature within all of us, which I would say is the same thing. The enlightened state, the sense of unity with all things. And I think there is a resurgence I'm noticing it in a lot of the soldiers and veterans that I work with. Like there's a resurgence in interest in Christianity in particular. I think that's good. And at the same time, I feel as though there is a lot of dogma that you could fall into as a trap, and we need to try and avoid that. I think that we need to avoid thinking kind of like the guy. Iconography was the word I was looking for before. The guy who came into the iconography that was kind of indicating that all of these paths have validity. I think that's true. I think at a certain stage in a person's life, any path, any spiritual path, as long as it's moving you a bit more closer to the divine, I think it's valid. So I don't think I think we do need to look at what's similar between all religions, which was really how my active spiritual path got started, instead of trying to find the differences, because God knows we are expert at finding the differences in each other's religions. I think what's important, however, is what's the same. Well, what's the same for most religions is we recognize that there is some kind of a higher power. Some people may feel as though that's a bearded God in the sky. That may or may not be correct. I think I think that's probably a stage of somebody's spiritual understanding, is anthropomorphizing God like that. But, what's the similarities? Well, the similarities is most religions think God is an all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful thing. Okay, cool. Let's start there. We can all agree with that, or we can't all agree, but most religious people can agree. So, yeah, I think there is I pray to God there actually is a spiritual resurgence, because I feel as though that's really the only hope for us, similar to what Dilan experienced in having more compassion for the people around him. That's, one of a common experience on psychedelics is recognize and feeling experientially that you are one with all things. And then what happens to your behavior once you realize you're one with all things? Well, that means, for one, if anybody is suffering, I am suffering. And it means if I am creating suffering in somebody else, then I'm actually creating suffering in myself. I'm making the ocean of being a little worse than it was by my poor behavior. You don't have to tell somebody who feels as though they are one with their neighbor, how to behave towards their neighbor. So I think that's the ultimate
Yeah.
reality of Jesus's teaching is love your neighbor as yourself. He broke it down into 2 commandments. Love God above all with everything you've got, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that just aligns you to a healthy way for you to be and a healthy way for you within the world as well.
Well, I think what you're saying is well said, and there's a metaphor that I really like that often is used in the Buddhist tradition, where they say that the instructions are a finger pointing at the moon, and everyone looks at the finger, but they should be looking at the moon, right? And so to me, I take it as a way. It's sort of a misplaced faith. Like people put their faith in the stories of what happened as being the literal truth, rather than placing their faith in the underlying message of the reality. And that's where there's commonalities amongst these practices of the interrelationship of people, practices of compassion, things like that.
Absolutely.
I'd love us to, as we wrap up here, for you to paint us a picture of, because this is a part of becoming superhuman that we're really focused on, is like, what is that positive future for humanity? So what is it that you're doing all of this tremendous work for, that you want to see us as a society realize?
I think it has everything to do with what I just said. I have experienced the unity in all things, and we are hurting. We are not normal in this suffering. We should be aiming for peace as at least the baseline. Everybody at peace, and then let's see what we can create. But
Yeah.
we've got our work cut out for us. What are all the obstacles to that peace? It's no freaking mystery. We know exactly what needs to be done. I think that's another beautiful thing about the time that we're actually in, is it's no mystery how we fix everything that's broken right now. It's just a matter of willingness and a matter of distribution of resources, really. Like, imagine if you took the most powerful organization and complex organization on earth, let's say it's the US military. What if you just flipped that US military on its head and instead made it a distribution network for ending poverty or starvation, at least getting everybody a fucking sandwich every day? Like, imagine, like, we've got the resources, we've got the know-how, we could end suffering of everybody on earth to a large degree, if not the entire way. People are still going to get hurt on a daily basis, but are they existentially suffering anymore? And I think that's really the baseline that I'm working towards, and I'm able to do that with my work because I tried to find a work that would help me reach that end goal, which is how can I actually help somebody in a way that truly helps them, that truly matters, that truly makes an impact. And I think that's, for me, that's what I'm working towards. Is I would love to run 1 million people at least through this protocol before the time I die, and see what happens from that. And then I think it's just, I think it's, what do we do once we're not suffering anymore? Well, there's a whole vista of opportunity. I think we could get super creative and super collaborative and cooperative. And I think there are untapped potentials to humanity that we can't even fathom right now. And I think that is, again, bring it back to somebody like Jesus, the kingdom of heaven on earth. What does the kingdom of heaven on earth look like? It starts with the kingdom of heaven within us. Once we find that, what do you do with that? Well, you try to spread it everywhere. And I think that's the end goal.
Beautifully said, Trevor. And thank you so much for I firsthand witnessed and benefited from the incredible work you're doing. The quality that you and care that you guys put into delivering that work is phenomenal, and you're getting the very much rightful validation from incredible institutes like Stanford that work with you to scientifically validate the impact of the work that you're doing, published on the most prestigious magazines in the world like Nature Medicine and so on, and love seeing you bring this work, this plant, this medicine to light, and much needed help to so many humans, whether it's addiction recovery or Parkinson's or even performance enhancement or whatever. A huge thank you to the work you're doing, and looking forward to visiting one of your centers soon, hopefully, and re-experiencing some of that magic. And for all of our listeners, we're gonna wrap up here. It was what an incredible conversation with Trevor Millar from Ambio. And please give us feedback and tell us where you agree, where you disagree, and how we can improve. We're really excited for this new chapter of our podcast that's Becoming Superhuman. We realize that this is the mission that we want to realize in the world. Give people permission to improve their lives. And there's a saying that I think of oftentimes: future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed, right? And tools like Ibogaine, tools like all kinds of therapeutics that are available to people, even ChatGPT, right? And these are tools that you can use to and humans will use to become almost godlike beings in the near future. And these tools give humans tremendous capacity and power, but it's not available evenly, not distributed evenly. We want to bring that knowledge to more people, and together create a society that aspires to live better lives and care for each other more, and truly live in that kingdom that Trevor just talked about, and reach for a almost superhuman existence. And very excited for this. And tell us what you like and what you don't like, and hit that subscribe button, and show us some love. And we'll see you next week with an incredibly exciting guest. I think we're interviewing Dr. Aubrey de Grey, a prominent researcher in the longevity space. So very excited for that. See you all soon. Thank you.